Had opportunities recently to reflect on that oft recited poem, Birth is a Beginning, by Rabbi Alvin Fine. You know it. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey. The versatile poem lends itself to being used at both simchas and sorrowful occasions, emotional peaks throughout the life cycle and the calendar year. Many of us heard the poem recited over the years in family occasions, perhaps in recent weeks, at ceremonies that we've attended, like namings and certainly funerals. Collectively, we also heard Birth is a Beginning offered as liturgy during the High Holy Day season, a mountain range of emotional heights and depths in the Jewish holiday cycle. Starting way back this past summer, the High Holy Day season began in the weeks leading up to the fast of Tisha B'Av. Together, we journeyed the winding path of Elul, ascending to Rosh Hashanah, then Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, and finally the season concluded this past week with Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah, an occasion marked by both a Yizkor memorial service as well as rejoicing with the Torah scroll in community. Each of the holy days throughout the season invites us to reflect on our lives. Tisha B'Av, traditionally the saddest day in the Hebrew calendar, marking the destruction of the ancient temples in Jerusalem and the countless other calamities our people face throughout the generations. Well, it's an opportunity for us to reflect on the suffering that still occurs in our world today. Rosh Hashanah, the start of the Jewish New Year, is an opportunity to review our actions during the past year and consider ways to improve ourselves, our communities, and the world in the new year to come. On Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, we abstain from eating and work in order to dedicate our minds, our bodies, and our souls to consider ways we have missed the mark and been untrue to our values, resolving to reconcile relationships with ourselves, with others, and even with God. Sukkot, also known as Chag HaAsif, the festival of the ingathering, well, it's an invitation to give thanks for life's blessings, both the ordinary and the extraordinary moments, the big and the small gifts that we cherish. Holding the three branches of the lulav with the etrog, the citron, in our hands, we shake them all around, acknowledging our connection with all things, including nature. I learned a beautiful midrash this week about the etrog. As you probably know, the etrog is only kosher when its pitom, the small protrusion on its end, is intact. Interestingly, the pitom is not the fruit's stem. Rather, it's the remnant of the plant's flower that receives pollen during fertilization. Therefore, the pitom represents the plant's future, its potential for growth and flowering. When we hold the etrog and the lulav in our hands, we might understand the ritual to mean that we too hold our future in our hands. See, that poignant metaphor reminds us that the possibility to transform our lives is always literally in our hands, if only we choose it. At the end of Sukkot is Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah, what I think is one of the most both-and kind of observances. Let me tell you what I mean by that. See, that High Holy Days finale, marked by both the Yizkor service and parading with our Torah, it's an opportunity for introspection as well as connection with the wider community, both an occasion for somber remembering and for joyful celebration. One or the other, either feeling sadness or joyful, well, it's easier because many of us prefer to live on one side or the other of that binary. and not dwell in the murky middle. However, we know that life doesn't really work that way. We forget that life has no straight lines or easy paths. The process of becoming is circuitous, to say the least. Yet so many of us expend endless energy wishing and trying to make it otherwise. As Alvin Fine's poem, Birth is a Beginning, explains, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Indeed, life is a winding pilgrimage, marked by towering heights and devastating lows. As Rabbi Fine reminds us, most of life is lived not at some high place along the way, but in the murky middle. I struggle sometimes to remember that, especially coming away from the High Holy Day season, what some consider the clergy's tax season or busy time, sometimes referred to as our Super Bowl. We move from one peak to the next, from one service to another service to another service, sometimes too fast to experience the in-between, where holiness dwells. So many of you in recent weeks, when you asked me about my 2 young daughters, have warned me to stay present because life moves really quick. Our babies become teenagers, and then college students, and eventually some become parents themselves. Dan, you and I spoke this week about how milestones like a child's B'nai Mitzvah, or even events at work, serve as markers of change and opportunities to reflect on where we have come in order to set our course for where we're going to go. Those same milestones, those times when we read Birth is a Beginning, the poem, are those moments that Rabbi Fine is trying to wake us up to in his poem. Victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey. Life unfolds in the valleys in between those emotional peaks. I think Jewish tradition is genius for many reasons. One reason is the holiday that begins tonight. Did you know that today is a special Shabbat? We're not done with holidays, not yet. It's called Shabbat Mevarchim, the Shabbat before the new month. In our case tonight, it's the month of Cheshvan, which begins at sundown on Monday. The Hebrew month of Cheshvan is unique in that it is void of Jewish holidays. After a holiday-rich Tishrei and many observances throughout the High Holy Day season, the coming Hebrew month of Cheshvan has none of the spiritual peaks like its predecessor. It's an entire month of just murky middle. While it's sometimes referred to as the bitter month because it doesn't offer us any reason for special celebration, tonight I offer thanks for it anyway. Perhaps this next month exists because it is time for us to put all of our reflecting and considering and planning into action. And we need space for that. A time for doing and living. That's why Cheshvan too is a blessing. So as the traditional blessing introducing a new month goes, may it be your will, eternal our God, to grant us long life, a life of peace, a life of good, a life of blessing, a life of sustenance, and a life of vigor. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey. Understanding that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in making the journey, stage by stage. May we encounter this new month with renewed appreciation for living life on life's terms, not only from high point to high point along our way, but living fully, even in the murky middle. Shabbat Shalom.